IPCC just projects the future using the scenarios and pathways. Okay, and they are in the last report, in the AR6 report, they have mainly 5 scenarios. Okay, we have 3 working groups. Work group 1, it's related to the physical science, to what happens with the climate in terms of physical variables. Working group 2, it's related to not only what happens in the physics, but also taking into account ecosystems and social behavior. And working group 3 is more related to the policies and mitigations, so the strategies to mitigate climate change. Based on that, in that last report, there is let's say a new methodology, because the previous report has split, and the previous one have split the scenarios in the physical part and then the socio-economy. And then in that new report, in the last report, they merged both, and merged also the nomenclature. So they just put the SSP1 is Shared Socio-economic Pathways. That is one, let's say the best one, the Paris Agreement one, and mix that with also the radiative concentration pathway, which is the physical evolution. And that has sense because both go together. In the previous report, they relate that to the socio-economy. Now it's merged together. One of the things that it's interesting to know about that is that only the 2 first scenarios are below 2 degrees in 2100. Okay, so only that 2 scenarios are safe scenarios. SSP2 4.5 and SSP3 7.0 are catastrophic. That means collapse of the current civilization. I don't care about SSP5 8.5 because that is unrealistic, because that means that there will be plenty of fossil fuels forever, and that is not the case. Okay, so let's focus on the first 3 or 4, and let's look at some variables of what happens to that. So first, you could see here different global temperature, land precipitation, and IC, and sea level change. And we could see that only the 2 first scenarios, so the blue line, the blue line and the other, the dark blue line, are only the ones that keeps after 2050 stable. The other ones in all the variables keep growing, which means, again, disaster. Because look at the numbers at 2000, at the end of the century, for the last 2 scenarios, in all the variables, the value of the variable is almost doubling the value that we have now. So humanity cannot survive, as we know, in such conditions. Okay, look at, for instance, for me, the most important variable one, it's not even the temperature, it's the precipitation changes. Precipitation is crucial in the, let's say, in the part of the globe that we are in Europe, for instance. So in the temperate, let's say, non-tropical parts of the globe, and also in the Arctic places. Okay, so the changes will be dramatic over there. So we need to, let's say, decarbonize the economy, and that is the main sentence that also, and the main message that also is giving the IPCC and from the IPCC mainstream media. We need to reduce the carbon emissions, okay? So that's the main message. But as it's just focusing on that, it's not totally correct. But at least let's see what we need to decarbonize. And here we have the trajectories that we need to do, okay? So to keep the warming below 2 degrees, which is the safe area, we need to start or now having a huge decarbonization of the socio-economy, or if we wait till 2030, then we will need to be more ambitious, which, okay, but there are only 2 strategies. If we wait, we need then be more ambitious, and that will mean in the terms of socio-economy, if we wait, that means that we change nothing, then in 2030 means that we will need to put the social economy, the global economy, in a constant crisis situation, right? Because that is the way that we are just giving a rapid decarbonization, or put a lot of resources, a lot of investment. So that means that we cannot pay for everything and diverge the investment from some activities, choose some activities to don't invest and put that investment in renewables and changing the social economy as a whole. Okay. So that are projections also about the different variables. Again, the precipitation. That is another important variable, which is the soil moisture change. That is very important because that affects to the crops and to the food that we eat. And if the soil moisture change, then we have big fires, we have less productivity in crops, and we have food security issues, okay? And then also it is important the temperature, so the hottest date in the year and how the temperature is evolving. And that is crucial also in developed countries. For instance, in Europe, heat waves in the future will be more often, more frequent, and will be more intense. And that for countries that are not prepared to have high temperatures like UK, like Middle Europe, like North Europe will be critical, okay? Because at least in Southern Europe, we get used to heat waves. Increase the mortality too, but we are more prepared because we are more used to the hot weather, okay? So that's critical. So when the working group 3 is talking about that mitigation, and working group 2 is talking about adaptation, and when we just talk about adaptation, for instance, of the buildings, we need to consider also that, okay? Then the other thing is what happens with the ecosystems, because we are extremely focused only on the emissions, but ecosystems, not only due to the climate change, but also due to the human action on the ecosystems, we are damaging the ecosystems in a way that has not happened till the last massive extinction thousands of years ago. Okay, that is a review paper in Nature 10 years ago that was telling us that, taking into account a big review about ecosystem changes, as soon as 2045, maybe there will be a sudden change of the whole ecosystems of the planet as the ecosystems get more and more damaged. Okay? If we look at the methodology of planetary boundaries, then the biodiversity, so the rate of extinction, it's 100 to 1,000 times more than in the previous, so that in 200 years ago. So we are losing biodiversity in a scale that is unprecedented in the last 1,000 years. Okay. More papers. That is in 2 years ago. For instance, they just document that we thought previously that if the ecosystem is large, the perturbations of the effects that we have on the ecosystem will be less dangerous than if the ecosystem is small. They discovered that is not true. So if we make a perturbation on the ecosystem and that ecosystem is large, the effects will be faster in larger ecosystems. More, the timing of the agroecological disruptions, so the timing of the perturbations that we are producing in the ecosystems, will be more frequent and more intense due to the combined effect of the anthropogenic perturbation and the climate change. And finally, the alarm in another paper that was from 2021 thing, or no, the last year was, that they said that we are underestimating the effect that we are producing on the ecosystems, because that is very, very dangerous. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem is that the mass media just give us a message, and the message, generally speaking, to the population, it's we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, and there's a way. Where there was fossil fuels, we put renewables, and that will reduce the fossil fuel, so the emissions, and that's all. That will be enough. Okay? Problem. That is not true, because, for instance, that is one issue that we need to also to consider. If we develop renewables, that will require more space. If we will require more space, that means that we need to industrialize rural areas and maybe protected areas, okay, which will affect ecosystems. So by reducing the emissions and damaging the ecosystems, we will have a double effect. We will reduce possibly the emissions, but then we will damage the ecosystems, which they capture carbon and produce food, and keep us safe from, let's say, plagues and other diseases and so on. So that's what was happened with the COVID, right? Which is a case. And the diseases just get more frequent, and we are more affected by sudden diseases, okay? So what is the problem? If we have the wrong message, and the wrong message is in the summary for policymakers. So if you look to the reports of the IPCC, and you look to the long report, and you make a search, for instance, and you search, for instance, for degrowth, the word degrowth in the working group 2 report appears like more than 10 times. But in the summary for policymakers, 0 times. Working group 3 appears more, I think, around 5 or 7 times in the long report. Summary for policymakers, no mention to degrowth. Business as usual. So what is the problem? The problem is that we are just spreading, or the media are catching the wrong message. It is not sufficient only to deal with the emissions without changing the socio-economy. That's the problem, okay? What is the danger? That we assume that we won't keep the temperature from below 1.5 Celsius degrees. We assume that we will get 2 degrees. That is implicit. That is not, I mean, explicitly said in the reports. But if we are not satisfying or complying with the Paris Agreement, we are higher than 1.5. Right? And if we assume or take that we can just stay 2 degrees, the danger is that maybe we won't stay in 2 degrees. We will go a little bit higher to that. But if it's a little bit high, then we just lie in the SSP3 and SSP2. One thing of SSP3 is that if you look at that scenario, it looks like, you know, if there was a film or a movie, it was interesting because it's called regional rivalry, which means that each region of the planet is competing for their resources and makes their own policies for their own. So there is not international global agreement about climate change, so they are competing among them, which is, let's say, dangerous from a point of view. Okay, so given that situation, what could be learned from that, and how we just take some ideas of what could be happening. is going to collapse, then let's look at history at big civilizations that have been collapsed. And one of them was Rome. Rome was a big society, just living in the Mediterranean, and they deplete the resources, and then after depleting the resources, they go down, okay? And now, and the funny thing is that the Romans, they think that they are the center of the world, okay? The civilized world. Now, we think the same for the globalized culture, okay? First of all, we need to make some comparison of what happens with the Roman collapse and the current collapse of the global society. There are similarities, and the point is yes, because, for instance, if we look to the economy, then the Roman Empire made quantitative easing. They make it by devaluating the amount of precious metals in the coins. Okay, we are doing the same. So by doing that, what happens? The same that today, inflation, right? They have the same problem. But if we go for another thing, for instance, what happened with the resources is the same. They deplete the mining. The Romans deplete the mining of precious metals. Okay, they and they also have an stagnation and also depletion of the agrarian production. Okay, that comes to less food, and that goes to the social issues, which is more unrest. So they need to invest more in military to keep control for the unrest. Okay, what are doing now? We are doing more or less the same. We are investing more in military. We have an increase of international conflicts, international tensions, stress, international competition between countries and even areas. What happens with the OTAN, Russia, China, okay? But more than that, they have inner instability in inside the Roman Empire. And here what we have, more problems with people unemployed, more problems about strikes, more problems with the salaries, which make the let's say society more, let's say, agitated. Okay, and of course they have the belief that they have the superior culture, which is exactly the same that we think ourselves of our culture. Okay, and plus we have an obsession with the consumption. Consumerism is what we just think that is the better, okay, to run the society. Two examples. What is happening with the diesel production, world diesel production currently? What we have now is that the production of diesel has been decreased till 2018. Okay, and that gives problems not in Europe, but as is giving problems in some particular countries in the third world. Okay. Together with that, we have to increase the military expenditures. So we are investing more money in the military. Okay, both in all the, if we look at world, but in Europe and also in US. Okay, so more or less in, let's say, in a rough way and a very approximative way, we're having the same strategies that has Rome in the peak of his empire, right? So that shows us that we are doing the same. And what happened with Rome? They collapsed, right? So if we are dealing with a situation that is just coping with the limits of the planet, and we deal the situation with the same way, the answer is clear: we will collapse, as Rome did. Okay. So how did that collapse could happen? That's the other question. Okay. Here I will just take my background from physics and use what is called in physics a phase transition. What is a phase transition? What happens when we boil water? When we boil water, the water is transitioning from a liquid state to a gaseous state. Okay, that is the typical graph, the typical graph that shows two variables, temperature and pressure, because as you probably know, you can, if you go higher, for instance, in a mountain in 3,000, 4,000 meters, the water boils at different temperature because it's different pressure there. So pressure, both pressure and temperature are regulating that transition from liquid to gaseous phase, okay? So that means that by the same temperature, varying the pressure, we will have transition or not. We will have collapse or not. So playing with the two variables, then we can avoid the transition or not, okay? So what is happening there? Phase transition means that we have, the transition means that we have, we are heating the water, and then that water it's become more and more hot, okay? The first way that the energy is transmitting in the water, it's by just conduction, which is one layer of water is transmitting the energy to the upper layer and so on, okay? But when the phase transition is happening, the way that it's the energy is transmitted to the body of water change. It appears bubbles. So that just breaks the structure of the water. So that means the way that the energy is transmitted to the system. Okay, that's important because now we are using resources. Okay, and that resources go to the society, to the socio-economy, and are transmitted to the whole society until get exhausted. Okay, like the energy that goes from the bottom of the pot to the surface and is dissipated. Okay, it's the same. The thing is here that what happened when we put or less pressure, or change the pressure, or increase the flux of energy, appears that the boiling water, and that means that will appear perturbations that to cope with that increase of energy in the system. Okay, what we are doing in the society historically is put more and more energy in the system. We are consuming more and more energy historically, right? So we are doing the same that if we are boiling the water, right? But the other thing that frequently gets overlooked is that we are also changing the pressure on the system. So what we do, it's temperature, it's a prognostic variable on how the socio-economy deals with the energy and resources. Okay, and we are increasing historically that input of energy, and we are increasing the temperature of the system. So the system gets more and more hotter. So that means that more tensions in the system appear because the system tries to dissipate that energy. Okay, faster. Then we change it. We are changing the pressure. So we are affecting the environment at the same time, and that is the problem. Because we are changing at the same time, not only the temperature, so the flux of energy, but also we are changing the way that the water is dealing with that transfer of energy. So, and what is the pressure? The pressure is the environment. So we are damaging the environment, putting more pressure to our system. Okay? So that conducts to a phase transition. Will appear bubbles of air that will be bubbles of unrest, okay? And the society will start to be more, let's say, deorganized. So I resume here in some points what is happening, just using that parallelism, that model, which is will happen or start to happen now phase transition, which is a society that requires a lot of resources and makes a lot of damage to the ecosystems and to the environment. We will shift to another society that requires less resources and that will not be able to produce such amount of damage. Okay, but the fact is that huge amount of resources and the damage of the environment, it's destabilizing the system and making that we make the things the society is making the things in another way. So what happens is that energy flux will triggers the environmental degradation and put more pressure on the boundaries of the socio-economy. So the way should be to go inverse to that, reducing proactively the way that we are using the resources. That means less use of resources and stopping the environmental degradation that we are doing. So by that, we reduce the temperature, so the flux of energy, so we don't put a stress to the socio-economy, and also we just reduce also the environmental stress, just releasing pressure to the system. Okay. How we do that? Here I proposed some 10 measures to reduce that in different areas, going from, for instance, legislation. So one proposal is if climate change is producing, and we know that, deaths on the world, then to not fight to the climate change, it's a crime, right? Because we are killing people. So we need to include that as a part of the human rights, right? It seems crazy, but it is. What's happening. Every company that is not applying policies or conducting strategies to deal with climate change and environmental degradation, it's acting against the humanity, against the future, right? So you need to be penalized. Second, politicians, the policy. That is hard to say also, but politics should look at the medium and long term. The people that is looking at short term, again, the same, it's killing people, right? So the parties or the politicians that they doesn't have as a priority climate change and environmental degradation as a priority, they are overlooking things that are damaging our civilization, our culture, and are conducting to the collapse. Okay. Then information. So we need to inform society of what will happen if we don't act immediately. And that is sometimes when I just explain that, the people tell me that you are scaring the people. And I said, yes, but if you go to the doctor and you have a cancer, you won't tell to the doctor, don't tell me I don't have a cancer, right? You are scaring me. Because the fact is that you have a cancer and you need to deal with that, right? The same is with that. For me, it's not an excuse to tell the people no, maybe if we don't do that, maybe we can get worse than now. No. That is like a doctor is lying to you, right? It's the same thing, okay? In order to that, we need to reduce the propaganda. Every advertisement, every commercial that goes against, let's say, denying climate change or denying the depletion of resources should be penalized. Because again, it's killing people, right? So it's not a joke, right? And what happens with the consumerism? At the end, what we discover is that the overconsumption is what is killing the people, right? So again, propaganda linked to overconsumption need to be avoided. Next, and that is also thing that to be considered, what happened with internet. Internet has a lot of resources devoted to it. Google has a lot of needs. The service of Google needs a lot of energy, and they make a lot of emissions. So people need to know that in order to reduce the amount of information that we have in the network. Okay. Then again, climate justice. The IPCC report, they said, as the Commission also just say, like, how is the sentence? Leaving no one behind or something like that, right? That is the thing. So we need to make a transition. We need to just change the society, but in a way that it's more egalitarian. It's not just overlooking or just leaving someone behind. Okay. Avoiding transportation, reducing transportation, particularly one concerns of air and marine, which are the two modes of transport that are hardly decarbonized. Okay, we have during MEDEAS we have we studied that, and we calculate that for decarbonize the whole transport globally, we need to reduce at a half the air and marine fleet at a half that now. So just to tell you, in Barcelona now it's there are plans to make the airport bigger. Okay, so that's what I am referring to when the politics is not linked to what happens with the climate change. Okay. We can group that measures in two main pillars. One is global policy, which go for legislation and politics. Then financial measures that goes for the consumption, allocation of budget, reduction in transport, agriculture, and increase protected areas and measures to healthy ecosystems. And then communication, which is global awareness and restriction of advertising that goes for overconsumption. Okay. Finally, conclusions. First of all, is that we are facing, let's say, collapse or collapse. No, there is another option, which is degrowth. Okay, we need to change the socio-economy. So the message at the end is that we need to change. We have two ways to change, proactively or reactively. Proactively will mean change the society with an aim to less resource consumption, to less, let's say, contamination, to less destruction of the ecosystems. Or if we don't do that proactively, the nature is very, very wise. So nature will act, okay? And we are not controlling nature. We are a part of the nature. So what will happen is that we will collapse. Sooner or later, problems will be bigger and society will react in a way like we did always in the ancient times or different civilizations. They did exactly the same. Don't act, but react. When we react, then we have that danger of collapse. But one thing we need to be clear about that. The more that we wait to make the changes, more harder it will be to be proactive. Okay. More that we wait, then we will be less active and more reactive. Okay. Finally, the final sentence is we have the only option to reduce. So you know that 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So we are focusing now in recycle. circular economy and all those things, okay? But what is important is reduce, okay? By reducing, we will just face the growth and avoid the collapse. So thank you very much. Questions?